want to offer sincere apologies for keeping you so long. I wouldn't necessarily or ordinarily divulge what we were doing in closed session for so long, but in a minute we are going to amend our agenda to reflect what that was about. It was about an expulsion hearing, and it's something that this board, I'm very proud to say this board takes very seriously, and so we didn't want to rush that. So thank you for understanding. I apologize for keeping you waiting. Give us just one further moment, please. All right, I'd like to reconvene this meeting of the Williamsburg-James City County School Board. As we do, if I can have a board member certified closed session for us.
Mr. Chair, I certify that to the best of each member's knowledge, the Williamsburg-James City County School Board, while in closed session, discussed only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements as stated in Virginia law, and that only such public matters as were identified in the motion convening the closed session were heard, discussed, or considered.
Thank you, Ms. Ortego. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Hummel. Ms. Aller?
Mrs. Ortego.
Aye.
Mrs. Young.
Aye.
Dr. Beers.
Aye.
Mrs. Donner.
Aye.
Ms. Hummel.
Aye.
Mrs. Hunley.
Aye.
Mr. Dowell.
Aye. I believe, Ms. Donner, you have a motion, item 3.3, to
Yes.
amend the agenda.
Mr. Chair, I move to amend the agenda to include action item 9.12, approval of decision regarding student case number 2324-004.
Thank you for that motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you for the second, Dr. Beers. Any discussion on that amendment? Ms. Aller?
Mrs. Donner.
Aye.
Ms. Hummel.
Aye.
Mrs. Hunley.
Aye.
Mrs. Ortego.
Aye.
Mrs. Young.
Aye.
Dr. Beers.
Aye.
Mr. Dowell.
Aye. All right. If we could all stand to recognize the flag, Ms. Young is going to lead us in the saying of the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Ms. Young. And we're going to move right into our public hearing on the fiscal year 25 capital improvement plan. Ms. Ortego, do you have instructions?
Do we have, I don't believe we have any.
Do we have any speakers this evening? Okay, we'll forego the instructions, then we'll move right along. Item 5.1, announcements and superintendent's report. Dr. Herron.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Following the Thanksgiving holiday, I want to take a moment to thank our dedicated staff for their commitment to serving our students, families, and community. And many of those staff are actually here this evening. I'm honored to be part of the WJCC schools community and to serve alongside you and this board. Though last week was a shortened instructional week, it was still jam-packed with learning and fun. Students at James Blair practiced their coding skills by conducting a mock Macy's Thanksgiving Day parade. They used various devices, measured the length of their streets and distance between turns, and then coded robots to carry their floats. Meanwhile, kindergartners at Norge read Balloons Over Broadway by Melissa Sweet, chose what balloon they wanted to create, and then narrated a class parade using a green screen to share with their families. It was a great week overall. Thank you, Mr. Chair. That concludes my short report for this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Herron. Any board reports this evening? You sure,
Yep.
Ms. Hunley?
No board reports.
Okay, all right. All right, we'll move right into our staff recognitions. I believe we have one. All right. Ms. Ortego.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Tonight, we are excited to celebrate a coordinator of related services from our special education team. The Virginia Council for Exceptional Children named Courtney Fuller its 2023 Related Service Provider of the Year. Mrs. Fuller, would you please come forward? Mrs. Fuller was nominated by her colleagues for her leadership and outstanding dedication to WJCC speech language pathologists, occupational therapists, physical therapists, and school psychologists. Mrs. Fuller's impact is felt across the division as she provides services for students, professional development for staff, and works with families throughout the year. Mrs. Fuller was involved in the creation of and now facilitates a new professional learning program at the division called RISE, stands for Responsive Induction for Special Education. This program provides targeted and continuous support to special education teachers who are new to WJCC schools. She has even taken on additional duties this year, serving as a case manager to address current speech-language pathologist shortages. Mrs. Fuller is a tremendous asset to our school division and continues to be an integral part in meeting the needs of all WJCC students. Congratulations and thank you, Mrs. Fuller.
Thank you, Ms. Fuller. Thank you, Ms. Fuller, for all of your diligent work and your care for our children. Really appreciate you. All right, move on to public comment on the evening. Item 7.1. Back to you, Ms. Ortego.
Thank you. It is at this point in our meeting where citizens are invited to address the board. Those citizens desiring to speak have submitted speaker cards to the clerk prior to the start of tonight's meeting. These speakers are asked to come to the podium when their names are called, state their names for the record, and direct their comments to the chair of the board. It is the board's interest and desire that all comments are heard and respected. Hence, the citizens are asked not to engage in applauding, verbal outbursts, or any other type of demonstrations during the presentations. Personnel matters are not considered in public meetings. Therefore, the board requests that all speakers refrain from making reference to specific individuals in any form or fashion. Though the board does not respond to your comments are heard and appreciated. Each speaker is allocated 2 minutes to make their presentation, and the board asks that you respect this time limitation. Also, please be reminded that no time may be yielded to another speaker. Your acceptance and adherence to these guidelines will be greatly appreciated. Thank you, Mr. Chair. My directions are concluded.
Thank you, Ms. Ortego.
First speaker is Jessica Anderson.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jessica Anderson. I'm both a parent and employee of WJCC Schools. And so I recognize many people are here today to discuss collective bargaining, but I would like to express my support of the school board drafting a collective bargaining agreement resolution in response to WJCC school staff reaching their required majority support. In addition, I want to address the recent discussion and impending vote for Governor Youngkin's model policy that directly impacts our trans and non-binary students. My first concern is the recent change to counseling language with the addition of gender and self-awareness to the social-emotional definition. While this update does make sense, parents having to opt in does not. The children with the highest need due to a gross lack of parental engagement will suffer due to this policy change. If any parental policy changes should be considered, let it be instead requiring parents to opt out to ensure those students who need it most can garner access. I also want to point to the issue that were discussed in regards to abbreviated names and or nicknames within WJCC schools. This is not only adding burdensome administrative staff tasking on educators and staff, but it is simply arbitrary. We are altering an entire public school policy to target a population that makes up less than 1% of all people in the United States. As I stated at a previous school board meeting, upwards of 40% of our homeless youth identify as the LGBTQ+ community, and the parents who have been tasked to protect those children chose instead to abandon them. These types of policies are protecting those types of parents, stripping our students of their rights, and in many instances, their safety. There are teachers in our division who are in an attempt to make students feel seen and special, sometimes give them a personalized nickname, perhaps a play on their given name, or something that reflects their personality. And this type of unique treatment will now be a violation. Even my own daughter being referred to as something simple as Sam instead of Samantha would require an administrative call or a formal process. I truly hope that you listen to the many voices tonight advocating against incorporating these policy changes and recognize the harm it's going to create for our most vulnerable students. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson.
Chris Conklin.
Good evening. My name is Chris Conklin. I live in Toronto, and my son is a 6th grader at Toronto Middle School. I'm here to address breaks and recess, or lack thereof, at Toronto Middle School. A student at Toronto Middle School may only have physical activity once during the school day, and that's during PE. I want you to think about when you were in school. Do you remember going outside during lunch? Do you remember playing sports at your school, basketball, football, soccer? Beyond the physical benefits, recess is important for kids emotionally and cognitively. Active movement helps kids regulate their emotions, process what they have learned in class. Equally important is the benefit of an unstructured but supervised break. The American Academy of Pediatrics says these breaks should be times when children can choose between physical, creative, or social options. Studies show that after recess, children are more attentive in class, perform better cognitively, and have fewer behavioral problems. The CDC recommends recess for grades K through 12, citing the numerous physical and mental benefits. At Toronto Middle School, there's an outstanding basketball court, a football field, a softball and baseball diamond. All of these are empty during lunch. Kids at Toronto Middle School eat lunch in the cafeteria and remain there until their next class. They're not allowed to run, play, or go outside during this time. Why? Decades of research shows that physically active children consistently outperform their inactive peers academically on both a short-term and long-term basis. I spoke with the principal, and she confirmed that there are no breaks and that during lunch, students must remain in the cafeteria. We can and we should do better than this. We have the data that shows the benefits of activity during recess. Allowing kids to be outside during recess would not cost additional money as the facilities are already in place. Parent volunteers can serve as recess supervisors. Let's make a positive change in our students' lives. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Conklin.
Leslie Henderson.
Good evening, I'm Leslie Henderson. I have children in the school division, and I'm also here as a school psychologist working in the division tonight. First, thanks for your thoughtfulness regarding items 9.9 through 9.11 and your consideration when making decisions about policies such as these that have significant impact on students and staff. We appreciate that you don't make these decisions lightly and that you are doing due diligence to consult those who are impacted the most. I am here this evening speaking as a school psychologist and mental health professional working within the public schools. School psychologists, school counselors, and school social workers serve as caring professionals for students. We are safe harbors and safe people to students as they navigate their path to adulthood. Sometimes we're the only adult in the life of a student who can offer them a feeling of safety and protection when others reject or misunderstand them. If school policy requires us to betray the trust of students by divulging gender affiliation, we stand to rupture our relationship with all students and can no longer effectively perform our duties as counseling professionals. We're also ethically bound to protect students, to treat them with dignity, and to not discriminate against them no matter how they identify in terms of gender. I will provide you with ethical guidelines and principles from the American School Counselor Association, the National Association of School Psychologists, and the National Association of School Social Workers. The collective guidance of our profession all support, 1, treating individuals with dignity and respect regardless of their gender or any other status. 2, advocating for anti-bias policies, specifically naming bias founded in LGBTQIA+ status. And 3, to keep information confidential unless disclosing information prevents serious and foreseeable harm. Regarding this last item, the prevention of serious and foreseeable harm statistics on the suicide rates of transgender youth indicate that LGBTQ youth are more than 4 times as likely to attempt suicide than their peers. The last thing we want to do as professionals who respond to crises such as student deaths is to be a factor that resulted in a student death. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Henderson.
Jennifer Putzi. Yeah, and I'm going to say who's up next, so you're ready. Is it Simon Voice will be next?
Hi, my name is Jennifer Putzi, and I am the mother of an 18-year-old transgender daughter, and so I think it's important that you all talk to parents like me and about our experiences raising these children. My daughter transitioned at the age of 7. While some teachers and administrators were unsure about what to do, and we were unsure as her parents, we worked together to come up with solutions for my child in WJCC schools. We've been here throughout her entire life. The schools have been wonderful. WJCC schools have provided a safe home for my child, for both my children, throughout her life, and we're proud to have her graduate from at WJCC High School in the spring. Teachers, nurses, administrators, and counselors were a really important part of this process for her and for us. Few of these policies will affect our child as she graduates in May. They may not have affected her anyway, as we've supported her throughout this entire process and would have made all counseling accessible to her. But my heart breaks for the trans students who come after her, and I know there are a lot. You may not know this, but there are a lot. Who may not have parental support and who therefore wouldn't be able to access the resources, especially the counseling resources that she has. Having my daughter at the WJCC schools didn't result in disaster. In fact, I like to think that my child teaches others about gender, about understanding, and about tolerance, and I hope you will learn from her and from other students like her as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pudsey.
Simon Boyce. Next up will be Joe Catterin.
Hi, I'm Simon Joyce, and I'm here as the parent of 2 children in the WJCC school system, one of whom is transgender. I recognize the pressure that the board has been put under by some very badly worded guidelines from the BDOE, and appreciate the care you've taken to make sense of them. But I'd still urge you not to pass any policy changes stemming from these guidelines, which, in claiming to respect all children and value all families, clearly target a family and a child like mine. The central problem I see is that these guidelines claimed their authority from legislation that required evidence-based best practices as guidance, but these guidelines cited no such practices and went against all the evidence about how best to support our kids. To take an obvious example, there's no best practice that I know of that would recommend placing restrictions on how and on what topics counselors can talk to vulnerable kids about, or insist that the very thing that troubles them can be off limits because a parent has identified it as such in advance. Adopting that proposed change would make a disastrous outcome much more likely to happen. And then we'd be acting as if there was nothing that could have been done to prevent it because we took away our counselor's ability to do the right thing at the right time. The other proposals may be less consequential, it's hard to say. Neither of my kids have ever been offered a sleep-away field trip, but maybe that's because of the COVID years. Under these proposed guidelines, we'd keep our child away if it were offered to her, because these revisions would place them in obvious danger. So that would be a learning experience that they wouldn't get, which feels like a very odd way to respect all children and ensure equality of opportunity. Beyond that, the language about assigning accommodation based on sex to the extent required by law is incredibly vague, and it doesn't take into account that dozens of court cases and legal rulings have struck down just this sort of imprecise definition. Before we start down that road, I'd ask the board to consider, do you know exactly what your proposed language is supposed to mean? And could you clearly explain that to teachers, administrators, and chaperones so they would know what to do and what not to do? Sorry, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Joyce.
So Joe Catterin's up now, and next will be John Riofrio.
Howdy, I'm Joe. I'm also here to talk about the model policies. So I just sort of want to interrogate the reasoning behind the model policies, because we hear that they're about staying in compliance and that we hear that they're about parents' rights. So for the first point with compliance, I reported on this issue for the Virginia Mercury when the latest version of the model policies came out this summer. And my assignment was to look into whether there's any sort of enforcement mechanism in the code provision in the state. I could not find one, and I don't think that there is one. There's no way that the state can force a school division to comply with these laws. It's a choice that's totally up to the school division. So on the second point, on parents' rights, which parents are we talking about? Because it's certainly not the parents of trans children who now have to go through more hoops and do more to support their child. These policy revisions are essentially making it more difficult for them to do that. So if it's not compliance and it's not parents' rights, then what is it? How did the students feel about it? Well, when the model policies first came out a couple summers ago, hundreds of students across the state organized walkouts protesting it. So if you have this opposition from students, and those other 2 common reasons given for it don't make any sense, then I feel like y'all have to have a pretty good reason to approve these policy revisions, and if you don't have one, then you need to go back to the drawing board with them and come up with a way to better support students. And finally, I just want to say that I support the collective bargaining, and I think that the teachers and staff have done what they've needed to do on that end, and so now it's time for the school board to form a joint committee with them to move that forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cateran.
So John Riofrio is up now, and next will be Paulina Carrion.
Good evening, I'm John Riofrio. I'm a parent of two graduates. I'd like to begin by emphasizing what we have in common as parents, educators, and concerned citizens. We all have a sincere desire to do right by all children. However, if we're honest with ourselves, we don't always know what that means. As we age, we become aware of the well-intentioned mistakes our parents made, not to mention our own mistakes. Parents don't always know what's best when it comes to transgender kids because there is a lot we still don't know about why, for some, their birth gender doesn't match their inner self. As the proud father of a brilliant, thriving trans daughter, I have learned much about what trans children need. What they don't need are school policies that make school a more hostile place. Trans people live in a world that is suspicious and hostile to them. This is not a fad. No one would choose to live a life that makes them the target of hate. Trans people are simply different. And I challenge you to really consider how incredibly brave trans kids are to stand up for themselves in the face of enormous ignorance and hate. It's not a perfect comparison, but imagine Ruby Bridges or Elizabeth Eckford, but without the cameras and the National Guard. Teachers in schools that ignore students' chosen names and pronouns inflict daily emotional pain that over time leads to the kind of depression and self-harm we've heard about already. Schools that support trans students in small but meaningful ways, names, pronouns, safe classrooms, counseling services, bathroom access for their realized gender, help to make school a safe place for them to come to better understanding of who they are. As the parent of a remarkable trans child, I am asking the board to place our schools on the right side of history. 70 years ago, this community voted over and over again to maintain segregation. Those parents too thought they were doing right by their children. I'm asking you to help our community by guiding us into light instead of choosing ignorance and misunderstanding. And I fully support collective bargaining and more recess.
Thank you, Mr. Riofrio.
So Paulina Carrion, and next up will be Sarah Huber.
Good evening. My name is Paulina Carrion, and I'm here representing my daughter, Milagro Riofrio, who is not here because she is recovering from her gender affirming surgery at home. But she sent me this message for you. Good evening, everybody. My name is Milagro Riofrio, and I am a Williamsburg resident and a member of Lafayette High School's class of 2023. I'm here tonight to talk to you about these policies and to tell you a story. When I came out and I started to think about my name, my parents were such a present part of that process. They were there listening to me think of what I wanted this name to be, what effect I wanted it to have, and we settled on my name, Milagro. The reason is because in English it means miracle. It is a miracle that I was born into this family of all families. That my parents are so deeply and unfailingly supportive is a more than a small miracle. I could have landed in a family where the reaction of my identity was horror, anger, and disappointment. I could have had parents who refused to use my name, respect my pronouns, force me to live in a way that would likely lead me to deep depression and a fundamentally incorrect life. But I didn't. I am, unfortunately, the exception. School may be, for some transgender children, the only safe space they have, a space they could completely lack at home. It could be a space to explore their name, something so deeply personal that it must encompass the entirety of a person in a few syllables. Denying these children this freedom is so fundamentally wrong for their well-being that it could put their mental health being at risk. Please, allow these kids this right. Allow them to explore this right outside their home, which may not be safe. Because at the end of the day, I think we all agree that all we want is kids that are happy, safe, and free. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Carrion.
So Sarah Huber's up now, and next will be Amy Clark.
Good evening. My name is Sarah Huber, and I'm the parent of a transgender child. I ask that you please reject the changes to policy JO, IICA, and IJ. Given the brief time, I will speak only to policies JO and IJ. The common change in these policies is to require parental consent for name and gender changes and counseling related to gender or self-awareness. These policies seek to strengthen parental rights, but do so at the cost of transgender children. For the 35% of transgender children who are accepted by their families, such as ours, policy changes will not have a large effect. However, 2/3 of transgender children are rejected by their families, and these children have increased rates of anxiety, depression, physical violence, and suicide. Schools are often the only safe spaces that these children have. The teachers and counselors are often the only adults that these children can trust. By requiring parental consent, you will be harming children who come from unsupportive households. This is not speculation or hyperbole. A Trevor Project survey of 34,000 LGBTQ+ youth ages 13 to 24 across the U.S., 48% of whom were transgender or non-binary, found that affirming gender identity among transgender non-binary young people is consistently associated with lower rates of attempting suicide. And roughly half of transgender and non-binary young people who found their schools to be gender affirming, and those who did, reported lower rates of attempting suicide. While we would all like to think that parents have their child's best interest at heart, sadly, this is often not the case for transgender kids. Please reject the policy changes and preserve the current policies which have been demonstrated to protect our children and to increase mental health outcomes. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Huber.
Amy Quark, and next will be Helen Murphy.
Good evening. My name is Amy Quirk. I have 2 children in the school division, and I'm a member of the Village Initiative. I've always valued the sense of belonging that my children have in the WJCC schools. Their well-being, their ability to learn, all rest on that foundation, that feeling of belonging. The model policies threaten that sense of belonging for our trans and non-binary students. If you don't feel safe attending a school trip or seeing a school counselor, you cannot feel like you belong. Schools should be havens for students' social emotional well-being, even if, especially if, they don't have that feeling of belonging at home. Federal and state law prohibit discrimination against trans students. These model policies could create legal liabilities for our school division, and more importantly, they can cause trans kids real harm. Research shows that trans kids that face these kinds of discrimination that these policies propose will have lower school attendance, lower self-esteem, higher rates of depression, and self-harm. We want our schools to be places where students feel like they belong just as they are and as whoever they wish to become. We cannot support policies that intentionally threaten our students. Belonging also comes from having a seat at the table. Our teachers and support staff need a seat at the table to determine their working conditions and their salaries. I support a call for collective bargaining, which will strengthen a sense of real belonging in our school at a time when teacher retention is critical. And finally, belonging also comes from seeing yourself in the school's curriculum. It has come to my attention that the African American History course is being offered at Jamestown and War Hill High Schools this year, but not at Lafayette. This is deeply concerning and also signals that fostering belonging through curriculum may not be our highest priority right now. I also support more recess. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Court.
After Helen Murphy will be Dana Hogan.
Hi, I'm Helen Murphy. I live in Williamsburg. Here's my son, Thomas. I'm here to speak against the model policies as well. First, I'd like to say thank you for your service to the school district. I know it can be a tough job, and it sounds like tonight was quite tough before you came out here, so thank you. Thank you for all that you do. I would just like to make 2 points tonight and not repeat what everyone else has said. First, I want to say that I'm the parent of 2 cisgender students at WJCC. I am not the parent of a transgender child. This is important because you should know that there are many families like mine who oppose these updates to the policies and who don't have transgender children. Not everyone feels comfortable speaking in a public forum. I certainly don't, but many of us exist, and we're here to support our trans friends and families. We see you, we're here for you. Second, new policies should be adopted when they address a problem and when they center what is the best interest for the students. It's not clear what problem these policies would be fixing.
We know from research that forced outing is incredibly harmful, especially to youth. So we know the costs of enacting these policies, and it will be borne by the most vulnerable in our community. But what is the benefit? What problem would we be fixing that outweighs the harm we would be causing? A clear rationale has not been addressed in any of your public discussions thus far. I implore you to put the needs of our most vulnerable at the center of your decision, and if not, please justify why these policies are necessary to pass. I also am the daughter of two union teachers from New York City, so I support the collective bargaining and I support more recess. Thank you.
Hey, Ms. Murphy.
After Dana Hogan, we will have Marco Sardi.
Good evening. I'm Dana Hogan, and I teach at Jamestown High School. I'm the sponsor of the PRISM Club for the LGBTQIA+ students and allies. I am here to defend a student's right to be called the name or nickname they want to be called. I was named Dana by my parents, a name that's not exactly gender specific. I was called a tomboy growing up because all the way I played with dolls, enjoyed learning to crochet, sew, and craft from my grandma's, aunts, and mother. I preferred to spend most of my time playing ball, climbing trees, and reading books. Now that I know more about gender, I would describe myself as female. I'm a cisgender person, meaning that the sex I was born with matches my gender. My name fits me, but that's not the case for everyone. I offer a story that is all too close to many students' realities. Sherry Wakes worried about how to dress, so her parents, who she worries won't love her if they know that she is not a cisgender boy, won't question her. She was assigned the gender of male when she was born because of her sex, but her brain is female. She loves her parents, knows that they love her as Stuart, but she hears them talk about queer people. She's even heard their friends say violent things, and they haven't spoken up against it. She feels like she's always hiding, a part of her identity. She told a friend, and he says Sherry when he can. Hearing the name makes her feel so happy. As a high school student, she has 4 90-minute classes on A days and 4 90-minute classes on B days. 8 different teachers. She's starting to feel like she can't bear to not be recognized as who she is. But what if her parents kick her out? What if she has to hide who she is her whole life to make others comfortable? Today, she's going to ask one teacher to call her Sherry. She asked the teacher, and the teacher says that she will. Sherry lets out a sigh of relief. Now for 90 minutes, Monday, Wednesday, Friday on one week, and Tuesday and Thursday of the next, she can relax a little and focus on what she needs to
I'm sorry, I
learn.
do have to cut you off there.
It's okay. Can I read just my last little paragraph?
That's the last one.
Yeah.
Please, yep.
I'll skip some.
Go ahead.
No teacher is trying to change a child's gender. All teachers want to do is teach academics to students and help them transition as prepared as possible for the next leg of their journey. Telling a young person that they have to be called William instead of Will, Catherine instead of Kate, Derek instead of Dee, or Stuart instead of Sherry is disrespectful.
Thank you, Ms. Hogan.
Okay?
Thank you.
So after Marco Sardi, we'll have Ellen Parm.
And while he's coming up, Ms. Hogan, if you would like to leave your remarks with the clerk, she can get those to us. It's up to you.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, to the board and Dr. Herron. My name is Marco Sardi, and I'm a teacher here at James Blair Middle School, and I'm also the president of WJCA. I'd like to thank the board and Dr. Herron for all that they do, putting many hard hours of work into hearing from your community and all of the work you do as a board. Mr. Chairman, on behalf of the employees of WJCC schools and in accordance with Virginia Code, I'm here to announce we have achieved a majority vote in our teachers across the division to allow WJCEA to bargain for their contract. In accordance with the statute, we will have a third-party certifying affidavit verifying these cards and their valid signatures as employees, at which point we will have 120 days to have this board draft a resolution outlining the manner and means in which we can come together and better at both our community, our students, and our staff through the contract negotiation process. This signals a milestone achievement in WJCC's ability to accommodate the needs of the community and to provide a clear and transparent avenue in which we can hear the voices of those who work directly with the most fundamental part of any school, our students. I know often our voice is one that brings concerns or draws attention to areas in which we have to grow. but we do so only out of a love for this community, a passion to give our students everything they need to succeed, and the duty to each other to ensure we remain a premier school division that has the best possible conditions for our staff so they can give the best possible to our students. This board has approved 2 consecutive competitive raises for our staff and has worked tirelessly to solve issues in transportation to support all of our student populations. This shows evidence of your compassion for your employees and your community that you serve, and your willingness to listen. I ask now to welcome a new way in which we can sit as peers on a joint bargaining committee to discuss the solutions we need for the challenges that arise. And WJCA is eager to begin. Thank you.
Mr. Sardi.
After Ellen Parm, we will have Ryan Shoemaker.
Good evening, Chairman Dow, esteemed members of the board, and Dr. Heron. My name is Ellen Parm, a member of WJCA and a social studies teacher here in WJCC. As a social studies teacher, thank you for your supportive comments for the AP courses that we know are essential in our school division. And speaking of essential, today we ask you for your support in our decision towards collective bargaining. I know with any decision or change that there will be questions, but with a collaborative approach where both parties in a joint committee that we are requesting with you can present issues to be solved and work together to seek solutions is a relationship that we see and continue to have in collective bargaining. We have seen this become successful in Richmond, Montgomery County, Falls Church, Fairfax, and many more. With other surrounding locals in the 757 organizing for collective bargaining in the Tidewater, I look forward for us to be the first to have collective bargaining and lead the way for other counties. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Parr.
So after Ryan Shoemaker, we'll have Andrew Kaysen.
Hello, members of the board. I'm a freshman at Lafayette, and I'm taking 8 classes for a day for an hour and 3 minutes each. All of my teachers are very important in my life, and they help me to prepare to be the best version of myself in the future. But I am just one of hundreds of students. They cannot solely focus on their students' needs, much less my own, because staff are in an undesirable situation. My teachers miss their planning period to cover another class or stay up late answering questions and grading assignments, and they do this day after day, and they deal with countless other predicaments as well. Not only my teachers are having trouble, bus drivers are facing tight time constraints because we lack drivers, counselors were having to schedule over hundreds of people's schedules all by themselves, and a lot of other people have issues too, but I'm not going to touch on all of them. And they all try their best, but they are subject to rules and hardships that they have no say in. But they need that say now. They know firsthand what happens and what issues occur, and that puts them in the position of knowing potential solutions. WJCC staff's voices need to be recognized. They need a joint bargaining committee with WJCEA to form a resolution for collective bargaining. Collective bargaining is a way for our very teachers, drivers, staff, and custodians to talk about their troubles and those of their coworkers. They will not fixate on improving the staff. They will focus on improving our schools. After all, everyone here is here for us, not the pay or recognition, obviously. They sincerely want to help, and the closer they are to the decision-making table, the better our school system will be. Give everyone at WJCC the voice that they deserve, the voice that can make the difference between success and failure. Create the joint bargaining committee with WJCEA to improve the students, staff, and school. We are WJCC, and we respect everyone in our system. So show our teachers we care about their voice. Give them a voice. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shoemaker.
After Andrew Kaysen, we'll have Stephanie Hood.
Good evening. I'm Andy Kaysen. I'm the treasurer of WJCEA, a teacher at Jamestown High School, and a parent of 2 in the division. I'm really happy here to tell you all that we have reached the majority of teachers, counselors, and therapists. And I also would like to underline the fact that that is the largest employee type in our division, making up more than a majority. So what does this mean? I'd like to clarify a little bit more, being the chair of the organizing committee. 750 employees have already signed authorization cards, and that is the result of a lot of work and teachers working in many different buildings doing what they do best, educating them about collective bargaining, and we've worked really hard to get to this, and we are seeing our numbers grow week after week. So what we would like from the board is to form a joint committee where WJCEA members, from the executive board to just rank and file members, sit down with maybe a few of you. I don't know exactly how many you need from the school board to make it an official committee, but really hammer out the details of what collective bargaining could look like. At least come to the table and have a conversation about what would this mean. To get into the technical details a little bit, we are going to have a little shakeup of the board, and congratulations to all of you who have served through your term. Thank you very much for your service, and I'm really looking forward to working with the new board. But we're not going to officially start the process through an affidavit, which then starts a whole 120-day timeline until that board is obviously sat. And we also want to include the educational support staff, all those custodians and bus drivers. They ought to have an opportunity to sign their authorization cards too. So we won't do that till the spring. So we ask you to please start a joint committee now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Case.
After Stephanie Hood, we will hear from Alexandra Hood.
Hi, my name is Stephanie Hood. I'm the mother of a child at War Hill High School. My concern right now has to do with virtual Virginia learning for the Latin class. Around halfway through Q1, they switched from not just War Hill, but I think it was Lafayette as well. The Latin teacher was not present for reasons I don't completely understand. So they switched the kids over halfway through Q1 to virtual Virginia. My daughter's in Latin 3, and in Latin 1 and 2, she very much thrived and enjoyed herself and enjoyed Latin. And with the virtual Virginia, she's been struggling. She had an A in Latin 1, a B in Latin 2, and right now, currently, she's failing. I want to remark that she's an honor student, otherwise had 1 B and 6 A's this last quarter. The students and the parents were not given a choice for this virtual Virginia switchover. The curriculum is more advanced in the virtual Virginia than it is in the WJCC school curriculum. And when they missed the first half, they weren't responsible for the grades for the assignments, but they were responsible to understand the content that wasn't, personally taught to them. The teacher did return to class shortly after this was established, and she's not allowed to teach in the class. She's allowed to answer questions when the kids ask her. There's a large gap, like I said, between the virtual Latin and the WJCC curriculum. It's more advanced, and the student, my daughter is in an assistant plan, and she doesn't do very well with this virtual learning. We suffered through COVID, and she's been really thriving, and then they throw her back into this virtual class. And I'd like the students to have a choice. They have a teacher right there in the class. I think they should be given a choice to either continue on with the virtual or to, have the in-person
Thank you, Ms. Hood.
teaching.
So after Alexandra Hood, we'll hear from Tamia Haygood.
I'm Alexandra Hood, and I'm a student at War Hill. Again, with the Latin, I just want to start off with, I do not do well online, and I know some of my peers don't as well. I'm struggling a lot more this year in Latin than I used to, ever. The content difficulty has definitely leaped significantly since last year. I have noticed that I don't enjoy Latin as much as I used to, and neither do my peers. I'm also not as involved as I once was in Latin. I am not sure if I can be as involved, but with the lack of a teacher present, I am not able to be as involved. I know I'm not an F student, so this makes me feel terrible. I just don't feel like I've been included in a decision that affects my future. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hood.
After Tamia Haygood, we'll have Jackie Williams.
My name is Tamia Haygood, and I'm a graduate student at William & Mary. But I'm also a former social studies teacher in Virginia and in North Carolina. Though I'm no longer in the classroom, I will always continue to support educators. And it is in that spirit that I encourage the board to support the creation of a collective bargaining committee with the WJCEA. Teachers, counselors, and other faculty and staff in schools are in a unique position to diagnose problems and offer solutions to fix them. Simply put, when faculty and staff thrive, so do students. I would encourage you to please act quickly on this issue so that Williamsburg and James City County schools can continue to be the exemplar it is in the country. Also, on a final note, when I was in middle school, my school was guaranteed 30 minutes of activity outside on top of lunch. So just something to chew on.
Thank you, Ms. Haygood.
After Jackie Williams, we'll have Isabel Witowski.
Good evening. I'm Jacqueline Bridgeforth Williams. I am a member of the community, and I'm also the executive director and founder of the Village Initiative. Thank you all for hearing me this evening, Dr. Herron. It's good to see you and members of the board. I'd like to express a little bit about a recent documentary that was produced by the Village in collaboration with the College of William & Mary, The Voices of Integration. And I'd like to thank those of you who were present and able to see it. But I would also like to encourage the rest of you to come and see the film. It is very important. It is relevant to today. It's relevant to our schools as we continue to face inequities that started at the inception of integration. It's relevant because those folks were trailblazers and they tore down barriers to make a way for people who look like me, who once weren't necessarily welcomed in the schools. And it's relevant as I hear the families and the supporters speak today about the transgender students as well. We don't want history to repeat itself. We want to always create a space that is welcomed, where folks are welcomed regardless of their race, sex, creed, or gender identification. And we want them to feel safe and secure in any environment that they're in. So again, this documentary is important because it talks about the African Americans that were able to integrate the schools and do it at a time when it was not necessarily safe for them. And they get to tell the stories and lead the narrative and telling the stories of how this took place. And again, we want to ensure the safety and security of all students. I, again, encourage you all to see the film. If you have not seen it, we will be screening it again. And if we have to and you need us to, we are more than happy to do a private screening because I believe as leaders of this school system, it's important that you see this film about how integration took place in our community. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Williams.
So after Isabel Witowski, we will have Rachel Moore.
Hi, my name is Isabel Wachowski, and I'm both a parent and a teacher for WJCC. We need collective bargaining so that teachers and support staff can have a voice. We are currently underpaid and overworked compared to our other neighboring districts. We don't even make the state average. We had to beg for 10% last year, and we didn't even get it. Instead, we've been given bigger class sizes with barely enough room to fit everyone, and more students are being added each day. Next year, in the middle schools, we'll be going from teaching 5 to 6 classes without just compensation. And to top it off, when are we supposed to even plan effectively? We need collective bargaining so we can have a more active role in helping funds go to frontline educators instead of bloated administrative salaries. So I ask for you guys to please work with WJCEA to start writing the collective bargaining resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wachowski.
After Rachel Moore, we will hear from Jamila Walker.
Hello, my name is Rachel Moore. Thank you all for being here and doing what you do. We appreciate you. I'm a parent of a WJCC student currently, and one other graduate, and one graduate of the GED program as well. I have several children who are cisgender and one who is transgender. So all of the issues in front of you this evening are very meaningful and close to my heart. I'm here speaking because I believe truly that we share a common goal, and that's a high quality education and a caring education for all of our students. As a teacher, I'm suffering a lot from exhaustion, and exhaustion hampers my ability to provide quality education. So I'm here asking that we can work together, that we can continue to explore ways of doing that in an increasingly improved situation, that we ask each other questions, that we talk to each other, that we consider multiple viewpoints as we collectively strive to make the best decisions for our students. I encourage the students in my classroom to always consider multiple viewpoints and to respectfully disagree and to have discussions. And I hope that the adults, all of us, can model that for them. Because together, we can improve. There's always room to improve. And I believe that everyone here tonight is committed to that. So I encourage you to do two things. I want to echo all those who have spoken before me, to urge great caution and consideration and kindness and care as you consider the model policies under discussion. I truly do not believe that they will encourage our students to do their best. I also encourage you to consider forming the Joint Collective Bargaining Committee as soon as possible so that we can continue on this path of working together. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Moore.
After Jamila Walker, we'll hear from Max Blaylock.
Good evening, board members. I'm Jamila Walker, a district parent and teacher. I come before you today to discuss our building schedules. Several years ago, 16 minutes were added to our schedules to prevent the district from having to make up inclement weather days. It has been noted that the district has since removed those minutes from our building schedules. While that may be the case, my building schedule includes an additional 25 minutes per day. Let me review my schedule. At 8:20 a.m., my students begin to arrive, and I am required to be in the room standing at the door. So my day with students has started. Announcements start at 9:35. The end of the day is scheduled for 4:05. However, each teacher has a bus duty, and on a good day, the buses have arrived and all the students are on the buses by 4:15, which is when my day, or end of the day, with students ends. The district seems to have been misinformed of the fact that teachers only have students for 6.5 hours. Factually, we are required to have our students for at least 6 hours and 55 minutes, which is 4,500 minutes per school year over the expected 6.5 hours as indicated by the district. Many of us teachers would prefer that the district adhere to its own schedule, as it would free up time for teachers to plan and complete other tasks that we end up doing at home. Sticking to the district's schedule would be a simple way for the district to support its teachers. It is very easy to overlook the details or the day-and-day details or details just such as this, as teachers tend to do whatever's necessary for their students. But I encourage the district to look at ways to trim those minutes to 6.5 hours as indicated by its very own messaging. Finally, I support collective bargaining.
Thank you, Ms. Walker.
After Max Blaylock, we'll hear from Jennifer Bickham Mendez.
Good evening. It's great to see y'all again, and thank you for all the work you do. Just trying to campaign to serve on the school board is hard enough, much less serving on it, so thank y'all for everything y'all do. I'm here as a pastor and as a parent of 2 cisgender students in WJCC schools to stand together with the parents and the school psychologist and everybody else who stood up here speaking out against the model policies. As a parent and as a pastor, we're called to do what is best for our students, and it has been already made clear abundantly by other folks that have spoken out, these policies are not what is best for our students. And I'll give you an example from one of my sons, who's in middle school. 3 days into the school year, he told me about one of his favorite teachers. He'd already told me that she was one of his favorite teachers, but he got in the car when I picked him up from school, and he was like, "Dad, I love her even more." Because you know what happened today? When she was calling roll, one of the students said, after she said their name, the student said, "Well, I really prefer this name instead of that." And she just said, "Okay," and changed their name. That's the kind of environment we need in our schools. Respect and care and compassion that has already been shared. This reverberates throughout the schools, throughout the students, and throughout the classes. And if we come down as a school board and as a division targeting students and their families simply because of who they are by choosing, we're not forced to, by choosing to enact these policies, then we are literally endangering students and empowering the worst of students and faculty and staff and parents as far as the way these students are treated. Jesus made it clear there's no such thing as other people's children. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Blaylock.
This is our final speaker, so go ahead. Bickham Mendez.
Evening. Never follow a pastor. My name is Jennifer Bickham Mendez, and I'm the parent of 2 graduates of WJCC who are cisgender students, and I want to join my voice with others here, so many others, with the teachers who are asking for a voice, talking about being exhausted, to the students who spoke tonight, who is supporting his teacher because he recognizes the lack of resources, how tired everyone is, and how hard everyone is working without a voice. And my friends, parents of trans kids and of LGBTQ children who need and deserve a nurturing and inclusive space where they feel safe, where they have the right to their public education. I mean, these are such crucial issues, and you all are also working incredibly hard, and I can tell by your faces that the discussion before this meeting was tough, but you have the chance now to do what is right and be on the right side of these issues. And so I urge you to support students and to create the Joint Committee on Collective Bargaining to give the teachers the voice that they so deserve in decision making. And I also support recess. Thank you. Have a great evening.
Thank you, Ms. Mendez.
That was all.
Okay, thank you all for generously providing your time to this conversation and providing content to the different perspectives on some of the issues, some matters that we'll be taking up later this evening. So I do appreciate it. I know the board does. We're going to move on to our consent agenda for this evening. I'm going to All right, so I will be asking for a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented, which includes item 8.1, approval of the financial report and monthly bills and payroll for October 2023. 8.2, approval of minutes from October 17th, 2023. 8.3, approval of minutes from November 14th, 2023. 8.4, approval of revisions to policy CBA, qualifications and duties for the superintendent. 8.5, approval of creation of policy CBB, appointment and term of the superintendent. 8.6, approval of revisions to policy CBD, superintendent's contract, compensation and benefits. 8.7, approval of revisions to policy CBG, evaluation of the superintendent. 8.8, approval of retirement of policy GCAA/GDA, administrators and educational support employee salary schedules. 8.9, approval of retirement of policy GDB, reclassification of educational support personnel. 8.10, approval of retirement of policy GDBA, regrade of educational support personnel. 8.11, approval of revisions to policy GCBA, staff salary schedules. 8.12, approval of revisions to policy ICA, school calendar. 8.13, approval of revisions to policy IGAI, character education. 8.14, approval of retirement of policy IHBH, charter school policy. And 8.15, approval of creation of policy LC, charter schools. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chair, I move that we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Thank you, Ms. Young. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Ortego. Ms. Aller?
Mrs. Young.
Aye.
Dr. Beers.
Aye.
Mrs. Donner.
Aye.
Ms. Hummel.
Aye.
Mrs. Hunley.
Aye.
Mrs. Ortego.
Aye.
Mr. Dowell.
Aye. And moving along, we'll move into our action items on the evening. If I can have a motion to approve the personnel actions as presented this evening.
Mr. Chair, I move to approve personnel actions as presented.
Thank you, Ms. Ortego. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Hundley. Ms. Aller?
Mrs. Ortego.
Aye.
Mrs. Young.
Aye.
Dr. Beers.
Aye.
Mrs. Donner.
Aye.
Ms. Hummel.
Aye.
Mrs. Hunley.
Aye.
Mr. Dowell.
Aye. If there's a motion to approve amendment to fiscal year 24 operating fund budget, item 9.2.
Mr. Chair, I move to approve the amendment of the FY24 operating fund budget as presented.
Second.
Do we need to include the amended amount? I think we should include the amended amount.
Okay. To move to approve the amendment of the FY24 operating fund budget totaling 191,800. Oh, sorry, 191. No, that's not it.
Amended amount is going to be that last portion. Additional funding in the amount of.
The additional funding in the amount of $1,427,000.
Okay, is there a second on the motion to amend the FY24 operating fund budget, which includes additional funding in the amount of $1,427,000? Is this not clear? If it's not, it's fine. Just say so.
No, I'm just looking because, I guess because we're shifting buckets, because it's the same amount of the total bucket. It's just that the buckets shifted from local appropriations to state revenue.
You're right.
It says as.
We need to have an amount here, and yeah, I read the wrong line. What is the total amount for the additional?
There aren't any additional funds. The total additional state revenue is $1,427,000, but this amendment is to reduce the local appropriations by that amount, so the overall budget is not changing.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for the clarification. I apologize, Ms. Ortego, for putting you on the spot there. If you'll read your motion again, Ms. Ortego, we don't have a second, so we'll consider.
First one?
Yeah, please.
I move to approve the amendment of the FY24 operating fund budget as presented.
Second.
All right. Thank you, and I apologize for that. A little clunky. Any discussion on that? I think I muddied it up enough. Ms. Aller?
Mrs. Ortego.
Aye.
Mrs. Young.
Aye.
Dr. Beers.
Aye.
Mrs. Donner?
Aye.
Ms. Hummel?
Aye.
Mrs. Hunley?
Aye.
Mr. Dowell?
Aye. All right, is there a motion on item 9.3 to approve an amendment to the FY24 grants fund budget?
I move to, Mr. Chair, I move to approve the amendment to the FY24 grants fund budget to $14,558,452. Okay, did I say that right?
Second.
$14,558,452.
Okay.
Was
That
that
sounds
okay?
better, yes.
All right.
Thank you for the motion. I think we had a second from Ms. Ortego. Ms. Aller?
Ms. Hummel?
Aye.
Mrs. Hunley?
Aye.
Mrs. Ortego?
Aye.
Mrs. Young?
Aye.
Dr. Beers?
Aye.
Mrs. Donner?
Aye.
Mr. Dowell?
Aye. All right, we have a motion, if I may have a motion to approve a budget transfer request.
Mr. Chair, I move to approve the budget transfer request for special education services in the total amount of $750,000. $500,000 from instructional salaries and benefits to instructional contracted services, and $250,000 from instructional salaries and benefits to attendance and health contracted services.
Thank you, Ms. Donner. Is there a motion, a second? Thank you, Dr. Beers, for the second. Any discussion on this item? Ms. Aller?
Mrs. Donner?
Aye.
Ms. Hummel?
Aye.
Mrs. Hunley?
Aye.
Mrs. Ortego?
Aye.
Mrs. Young?
Aye.
Dr. Beers?
Aye.
Mr. Dowell?
Aye. All right, item 9.5, is there a motion to approve amendment to local plan for gifted education?
Mr. Chair, I move to approve the amendment to the local plan for gifted education as presented.
And is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Hundley, for the second. Ms. Aller?
Mrs. Ortego?
Aye.
Mrs. Young?
Aye.
Dr. Beers?
Aye.
Mrs. Donner?
Aye.
Ms. Hummel?
Aye.
Mrs. Hunley?
Aye.
Mr. Dowell?
Aye. And is there a motion on item 9.6, approval of program of studies 2024 through 25?
Mr. Chair, I move to approve the program of studies 2024 to 2025 as presented.
Second.
Thank you for the motion, Ms. Donner, and the second, Ms. Ortego. Any discussion on the program of studies as we received 2 weeks ago? I wanted to say thank you to the staff who put together a really fantastic presentation and walking us through some of the critical changes, and just really appreciated that presentation. Ms. Aller?
Mrs. Donner?
Aye.
Ms. Hummel?
Aye.
Mrs. Hunley?
Aye.
Mrs. Ortego?
Aye.
Mrs. Young?
Aye.
Dr. Beers?
Aye.
Mr. Dowell?
Aye. All right, item 9.7, may I have a motion to approve request for proposal 20240501554, bulk fuel services?
Mr. Chair, I move to approve the contract for bulk fuel delivery services to World Fuel Services.
Second.
Thank you for the motion. And the second, Ms. Donner. Any questions or comments on this item from the board? Again, this is a collaborative, I believe, venture that we're entering into with James City County for bulk fuel services. Ms. Aller?
Mrs. Hunley?
Aye.
Mrs. Ortego?
Aye.
Mrs. Young?
Aye.
Dr. Beers?
Aye.
Mrs. Donner? Ms. Hummel?
Aye.
Mr. Dowell?
Aye. And item 9.8, if there's a motion to approve revisions to world languages and science textbook selection and adoption.
Mr.
Timeline.
Chair, I move to approve the revisions to the World Languages and Science textbook selection and adoption timeline as presented.
Thank you, Ms. Hummel.
Second.
Thank you for the second, Ms. Ortego. I think we have some additional information on this item. Dr.
Yes.
Herron?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As you're aware, the board approved the whole timeline for selection and adoption of textbooks at the beginning of the year. We've had to make a second change now to that order of events in the textbooks, and Ms. Mumpoint, Director of Secondary Curriculum and Instruction, is going to very briefly describe the change and why. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, Dr. Herron, and members of the board. This evening, I'm proposing revisions to the World Language and Science textbook selection and adoption timeline It was approved by the board on September 19, 2023. The Virginia Department of Education has expedited the revision of science standards to January 2025 with full implementation of revised standards during the 25-26 school year. The VDOE recommends waiting until the new standards have been adopted and updated textbook lists have been released. This will apply to chemistry, physics, anatomy and physiology, and environmental science. Our current AP textbooks are on the approved AP Physics textbook list and remain in good condition, so this course is also being removed from the original textbook adoption and selection list. These updates leave AP Chemistry as the only science course to adopt new textbooks in the 2023-2024 school year, honoring the original spring 2024 timeline. In addition, appropriate staff were not available to facilitate the process for world languages textbook adoption during the original approved timeline in the fall of 2023. The recommendation is to shift the American Sign Language textbook adoption to begin in February 2024. This concludes the proposed changes, and I welcome any questions at this time.
Thank you, Ms. Monpoint. Any questions for Ms. Monpoint on this? Has a committee, a review committee already been put together for February?
Yes.
Okay, that's already been done. Okay. All right. Thank you, Ms. Monpoint. Ms. Aller?
Ms. Hummel.
Aye.
Mrs. Hunley.
Aye.
Mrs. Ortega.
Aye.
Mrs. Young.
Aye.
Dr. Beers.
Aye.
Mrs. Donner.
Aye.
Mr. Dowell.
Aye. 9.9, if I can have a motion to approve revisions to policy JO, student scholastic records.
Mr. Chair, I move to approve the revisions to policy JO, student scholastic records as presented.
Thank you, Ms. Ortego. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Young. Discussion on this item? Ms. Donner?
I have a question. I don't know if it would be for Dr. Keever or someone on the policy committee, but as this refers to the names, I'm just curious about what legal liability that creates, because it is a policy that, while universal on the surface, targets a specific group of students, and it's aimed at that way. And in the model policies, what's written to be very specific, it's linked into a transgender policy. And so I'm just wondering, from like an anti-discrimination perspective, or something that we could get sued for targeting a specific group, if that was discussed and if there are those concerns.
Dr. Keever.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. We did consult legal counsel as we were discussing revisions. Legal counsel advised that the language that we were adding to this particular policy was legally appropriate with respect to students in general.
Thank you.
Any other questions or discussion on this policy? We have a motion on JO.
And
Ms. Hummel.
I would just like to, acknowledge all of the parents that came out tonight to speak, and to acknowledge their bravery in speaking to us. What I think the school system has tried to do I serve on the policy committee, is to take direction from our administration, who has taken even more direction from our legal counsel on how we can balance some of these conflicting forces that are coming down on us as a school board, and what is the fairest way for us to straddle these two somewhat conflicting, a lot of times conflicting federal law directives from the Department of Education. And I think what we're trying to do here is to not be very, very targeting to any group of individuals in our policy. And Dr. Kiever, if you can talk about that a little bit. When we specifically didn't want to make this targeted for any group. No. It was to be a much more general, a general policy for clarifying the student record. Maybe you could speak on that and some of the advice that we receive from our council.
Yes, ma'am. I think you captured it well. The revision to JO is relative to all students who may wish to have or utilize a different name. And that the guidance there, as we discussed it with council, was that the language that we were bringing forward met the model policy guidance, fit within the parameters of case law and potentially federal law. So as you mentioned, there are a number of different entities that we are working collaboratively to try to ensure that our students in total feel supported and that there are processes in place for us to make that happen.
Thank you, Dr. Kiever. Ms. Hundley?
Yeah, I just want to take some time to speak on names. As a former teacher, and even going back historically, the name is the first thing you get. It's the one thing you own. And a lot of times children don't have any say in what their name is. And even when you go back biblically to the garden and who got the first name, and then he named other things. And there are even people in the Bible who have names that fit for personalities, and they weren't very good names, and they were stuck with them. And some had names as, Saul became Paul, and they were able to change their name. And then there was a time in history where people came over in ships, as we all know, and their names were taken from them, and they were given other names. If you remember class, I remember my name is Kunta Kinte. No, it's Toby. And then there's another classic, they call me Mr. Tibbs. And then we think of how parents, we were all parents. I remember as a teacher, my husband's a teacher, it was hard for us to name our child because we'd pick a name and I'd go, oh no, I taught a such and such, so-and-so. And then there were parents that went to the book and picked out names to find out strong names or, and then there was a time in the 80s, I remember very distinctly, where there were parents naming their female children male names because there was a time where you didn't have to check your gender on applications, and they felt like if they had a male name, they would get certain jobs. I remember even as a teacher, some names I'd say, oh, that's a neat name, and they'd say, well, that's from Game of Thrones or something, these names, and so there were different names that way. And as a teacher, I never labeled cubbies because the role would say one thing, and the child would want another. And as teachers, we just want to teach them, what's your name? Let's go. Let's start reading. Turn to page 25. Names are important. I always say it's not what you call me, it's what I answer to. And I think of, and I'm not trying to get biblical or political here, just historically, even Jesus has about 50 names. Simplest one is I am. So before the vote, I just wanted to go on record to tell you what I feel. I feel children should be called, what they feel comfortable being called. They don't have a choice in it, and it makes them feel comfortable. And I know, I feel like football studies are targeting. I do feel it's targeting, and that's my feeling.
Ms. Hundley, any others? Okay. I feel compelled to offer some response to what I've heard, and I genuinely agree with my colleagues and some perspectives that I've heard here. As I look at JO and the additional language that we are considering, and I appreciate the work of our policy committee. I know if this feels like a heavy moment right now, and we knew that this was coming, and it's a privilege to serve in this way. I know that this was even more important and heavy in those policy committee deliberation conversations, so I appreciate the work that you guys have done. It states, with written permission by the parent or an eligible student, school staff shall refer to a student using the requested preferred name on the record. And then it goes on to state, no student record identifying information is to be changed without eligible student or parent permission. As I read that, it reminds me that there's a process in place that's not new and that's not novel. Every single time a student applies for an educational experience with WJCC or any school division in the state, there's a document that's filled out and there's a record identifying that person's name, that young person's name. And so there's always been a unstated kind of obligation to address a student by that name, while of course, and we've heard conjecture that, well, what about the preferred names or the nicknames? But then we have to consider that there's a moment in time where a particular student might want to be called or referred to by a different name. And I think this really, it offers a teacher, a faculty, or staff member guidance on what to do, because this is a challenging topic for some. How do I respond when a student comes to me and says, I want to be called Sam, or I want to be called Joe, and that's not their stated name on that first record that a parent signed them into school on. So I think it provides clarity for a lot of teachers and staff members, faculty members that genuinely want to do the right thing by all parties. For me, that's my perspective. I'm ready to support this with that in mind. Dr. Beers, you look like you want to say something.
I have to say that I've spoken to dozens and dozens of teachers over the years, more recently, and I've found no teacher that feels terribly uncomfortable with using the name that a student says, this is the name I prefer if you don't mind, and they basically say, fine, that's okay with me. So this seems so torturous, and I'm trying to understand why it's so hard to talk about this. I don't see what I'm having trouble with the issue. I think it's a pretty straightforward. I approve of the changes in the policy, and I just don't. I don't know. There seems to be so much hand wringing dealing with this, and I don't support that. I don't think it's necessary.
Thank you, Dr. Beers. Yes, Ms. Ortego, and then we'll come back to Ms. Donner.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that I also read this as a protection of the rights of the parents that spoke tonight, of all parents, who named their children at birth, and parents who were so supportive of their children at various stages of transition, and who wanted to change their child's name on a record, and this supports their right to do so. So I see it as protecting a wide swath of people.
Thank you, Ms. Ortego. Ms. Donner.
As I read this policy, I have a different interpretation from what I'm hearing from the board. And so the way that I read this, it hamstrings our teachers' ability to connect with students in the way that the students want to be connected with. Because by including this language in the current policy, what it states is that a teacher must call the student by what is on their record. So if I walk into that class and say, I want to be called Andy, and that is not on my record, and it's just I decided in middle school that day, which I actually did, that I want to be Andy, that is not applicable. And then if one of those teachers does do that, then that teacher is now in trouble and in violation of the policy. And I think and I know Mrs. Humble, you're bringing, and I shouldn't, that is the way that policy reads, because in the way that we are going in this society is that the one teacher, there will be a teacher that is going to go outside of that policy and call a kid something else, and that teacher will be brought forward because of violation of the policy. And so my question around process is that if this is truly the policy, then how, from a division's perspective, are we going to ensure that in every single classroom and every single day, it is the person is being called by their name on the record? So if I didn't want to be Andrea anymore, I want to go by A. Elaine Mitchell, but my legal name says Andrea on there, I couldn't do that unless that is written in the policy. And so I believe that it does become targeting, and you open yourself up to a lawsuit because you are not able to enforce this policy in every classroom and every day to make sure that every student is being called by what is on that piece of paper. And it is not something that is adjudicated equally, and it puts a barrier between our teachers and our students, and it opens up our teachers to be written up and in violation of a policy. So I'm against this policy.
Thank you, Ms. Donner.
Well, I haven't spoken.
Ms. Young, go for it, Ms. Young.
Excuse me?
Go ahead, Ms. Young.
One of the things that I like best about the way that we're attempting to approach this in the school district is we're trying to stay within the limits of the law. The state law and federal law is very straightforward. And student records have always been very specific. The name that's on there, that doesn't mean that if you have a kid, I had a child that actually her name was Samia. She had chosen it when she was 6 years old. That became her name, and all the rest of it, all she had was the last name until she chose that name, which was very unusual. But I don't see this as targeting any specific group, and I do appreciate the fact that the policy isn't allowed to be changed without the permission of the parent or an eligible student who's 18 years or older. As far as I know, ever since I taught school, the name that was on the school record is what kids were called. And I do understand that we're entering a phase in our society that may eventually challenge that, but personally, I don't want to have to be able to, as a teacher, it's protecting teachers also, because it gives them the right to use that student's original name. I agree with Dr. Beers. I don't think it's a big issue, and I think and I understand, and Ms. Donner, I understand your point of view.
Thank you, Ms. Young. Any others? Ms. Ortega?
I just wanted to ask, and Dr. Keeber, correct me if I'm wrong, I do believe that the law code provides the, I don't know what the exact wording is, I'm trying to find it, but general derivatives of names commonly used. Is that not correct?
That's right.
So if Andrea wanted to be Andy, that would be a common derivative of that name.
That is correct.
All right. Any final comments or questions? Ms. Hummel?
I would just like to say that.
This will be the last one, maybe?
Okay. That when the policy committee is meeting, we are taking direction from administration and the lawyers. We're taking direction from the very, very people that are in the classrooms. And we're taking direction from them as what would you recommend that these policies be, and then we review them. I think that everyone's best interest at heart in this policy, trying to balance the model policies while keeping with federal law and trying to avoid lawsuits all around. And hopefully, like Dr. Beer said, that this is not as big of a deal as maybe people want to make it, that teachers like you could call if your kids wanted to be called, something during the school day and the teacher's okay with it, the teacher goes ahead and life goes on. It's the same thing that's happened all along. So I'm hoping that this is just a way to have us be in compliance with the Department of Education without running afoul of federal law at the same time.
Can I ask another question? So if a child's name is Frances and is a girl and she wants to go by Frankie, that is how do we know which names can be,
That there are a million. If I would speak on this, I'd say there are a million different scenarios. It's a fluid kind of situation, and depending on the circumstances and what's asked of a particular teacher or educator, parent involvement, it's very fluid. That's my perspective on it. I want to. We have a motion. We've got a second. We've had discussion. I think we've concluded discussion. Take a pregnant pause before we move to Ms. Aller. Ms. Aller, would you take the roll on this question?
Yes, sir. Mrs. Ortega.
Aye.
Mrs. Young.
Aye.
Dr. Beers.
No.
Mrs. Donner.
No.
Ms. Hummel.
Aye.
Mrs. Hunley.
No.
Mr. Dowell.
The motion does pass. We'll move on to item 910, approval of revisions to policy IICA, field trips and excursions. Is there a motion?
Move to approve the revisions to policy IICA, field trips and excursions as presented.
Thank you for the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Hummel. Discussion on 910, revisions to policy IICA. Hearing none. Ms. Aller? Please, Ms. Donner, we'll pause.
So just for a clarification, so I think that everyone is clear, either Dr. Kiever to the board, to the policy committee. So this one, it allows us to, it directs us to follow the law, and the current law and interpretation of the law is Grimm's versus Gloucester, which would allow for a transgender child to choose a roommate, given all of the policies around how you pick roommates that would align with that child's gender identity.
That is correct.
Okay. Any other comments or questions?
Oh, but
Go ahead, Ms. Hummel.
to continue what Ms. Donner said, she asked a school board question. We all have it right in front of us. And so to be clear with the audience listening tonight, she specifically said which law is being referenced in the policy regarding overnight trips based on sex to the extent required by law. And the answer was two things: Grimm versus Gloucester County School Board from the 4th Circuit, 2019, as provided by legal counsel, Grimm would likely be interpreted to require school divisions to permit transgender students to choose accommodations while traveling that are consistent with their gender identity. And then the second would be the Virginia Human Rights Act, which prohibits discrimination on the basis of gender identity, among other protected characteristics.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Hummel. Ms. Haller.
Mrs. Ortega.
Aye.
Mrs. Young.
Aye.
Dr. Beers.
Aye.
Mrs. Donner.
Aye.
Ms. Hummel.
Aye.
Mrs. Hunley.
Aye.
And Mr. Dowell.
Aye. And item, I'm remembering that we have a 912 because nobody's going to remind me. I'm sure somebody would have. But 9/11, if there's a motion to approve revisions to policy IJ, school counseling programs. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chair, I move to approve the revisions to policy IJ, school counseling programs as presented.
Thank you, Ms. Ortego. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Hummel. Again, open up to discussion on this item, school counseling programs. Ms. Donner.
Another question for Dr. Kiever for clarification. So if, as I'm reading this, if I understand our current policy in Virginia law, our current policy is that all students are opted into counseling and that students or parents are able to opt their child out. And so this policy does not change how we've operated our counseling services to date.
That's correct.
And so this policy just is adding in the language that gender identity might be part of one of the conversations that is happening during discussions related to gender or self-awareness. Might be one of the conversations that's happening, but that does not change. It has always been that a parent could opt their child out.
I don't know if it's always been.
Not always been. Our current
it's currently part of that there is an opt-out provision available. We provide notification of that at the beginning of the school year. A parent can then file the opt-out. It doesn't have to be at the beginning of the year. It could be at any point during the year that the parent wishes to opt his or her child out of the school counseling program.
And this policy does not require if a student who has been opted in does not require that the counselor then stop the conversation if gender identity comes up and report that to the parent. That counselor can continue to have the conversation and then move forward based on whatever the protocols would be for conversations. It doesn't have the outing.
I want to make sure I understand your question correctly. I don't want to. Would you say that one more time?
So I think what I want my question is, the governor's model policy requires that if a child were to bring up gender or self-awareness, that at that point the counselor would have to stop the conversation and then notify the parent and get permission to continue. The changes that we're making to this policy do not have that component included where that conversation would have to end.
We are specifically mentioning gender or self-awareness to inform the community parents by way of policy that may be part of a conversation that comes up. So if you wish to opt your child out of that, there is a provision that allows for that to occur. So the model policy is counseling services on gender cannot be provided to students under 18 unless the parent is first informed and given an opportunity to object.
So this allows us to, by this policy, we are informing parents that that could be part of a conversation, and that allows them to opt their children out.
Through our discussion with legal counsel, this meets the requirements of the model policy, whereby parents have an opportunity to opt out of a particular conversation with a school counselor.
Okay.
Ms. Donner? Ms. Ortego?
Just to piggyback on what Mrs. Donner said, so just is the opt-out that is, I think, provided annually, right? At the beginning of the school year?
Notification of the opt-out is provided annually at the beginning of the year.
Would a parent have to opt out at that point? And would they be opting out of all social emotional counseling, or can they specify?
There can be specificity.
There can be.
That is correct.
So
and it
someone
doesn't
might
have
want gender in there and something else out, and they could do that too.
and it doesn't have to be at the beginning of the year.
Right. At any point.
Correct.
And then further clarification, not on something that is being changed, on point 4, maintenance of records. All information and records of social emotional counseling are to be kept confidential and separate from the student's educational records and not disclosed to any third party without prior parental guardian consent or as otherwise provided by law. Does that mean that a concerned parent could have access to counseling records if they requested them? Because they can,
Does that mean say that one more time?
a parent who has a concern, any concern at all about their child's mental well-being and what may or may not have been discussed with a school counselor, do they have access to those files? They do, right?
Based on the wording of that policy, that is correct.
So what I'm trying to say is that if there are parents who are concerned about what may or may not be being discussed with their children, they have a way to access that, despite the policy change that we're making.
If I'm following you, I believe you're stating it accurately. Like that process has not changed.
Right. So it's not that this is being hidden. That, there are things being discussed that are being hidden from parents if they wanted to access the records.
Correct.
Okay.
I have trouble with that, and I ask this because I do have trouble with it. Maybe you can help me out here. As I read for maintenance of records, to me it seems entirely related to third-party disclosure, not necessarily
to parents.
It's third-party disclosure.
Right.
So if there was a need for the child to have services or counseling services outside of the school environment, and those two parties, the third party and the first party, needed to collaborate, that parent needs to give permission for that third party. That's how I read it.
That's the way it reads.
Mr. Dowell, I think that is correct. So back to Ms. Ortego's point,
I think there's a question there that Ms. Ortego has that's not necessarily.
it's not dialed into number 4 of the maintenance of the records.
Right.
Access by the parent to a conversation that occurs with the student.
Or right to their counseling records.
I don't think that answer's there.
Concur.
Okay. Ms. Young?
Mr. Kiefer, which brings up a question. Do counselors keep separate records of counseling with individual students? I mean, it's obviously from what this says, it doesn't go in their student record. But do they keep a record? I mean, my daughter is a counselor, and she keeps records. But I don't know about school counselors. That's my question.
Well, I think the variety of the note-taking might depend on the topic itself. So if it's a conversation about course selection, it might be note-taking relative to your program of studies and what it is that you wish to study. So I think it would be hard for me to quantify the exact notes taken in each instance.
I don't think that's what I'm asking
Okay.
for. I think my simple question is, do counselors keep notes of, I mean, they right now we're lucky because we have the counseling ratio down to 250 students per counselor, but I mean, that's still a lot of students to keep track of. So, and of course
They do keep notes, Ms. Young. Similarly, administrators keep notes when they have interactions
Right.
with parents, etc.
Right. The other thing that that we discussed in policy committee, which I think is important, is that at the beginning of the year, there's going to be during the orientation that there is going to be information given to parents about opting out. And I do want to correct one of the things that one of the speakers said tonight. It's not an opt-in program. It's an opt-out program. If you don't want your student to have counseling services as specified in this policy, you can opt them out. Because otherwise, all students are eligible to have counseling from a school counselor, and which are very highly trained individuals in our school system. It doesn't exclude any student, other if a parent chooses not to have that student counseled on the list that was in here about social emotional counseling, and it goes through and the part that was added, which Dr. Keever, I'm glad I can say doctor finally, talks about discussions related to gender or self-awareness. And so that was included specifically to make sure that we're not violating any laws, and also to inform parents about what a counselor may be discussing with a student. But parents can opt their student out of that discussion if they so desire.
Thank you, Ms. Young. Ms. Donner?
This is a retired policy, but I think going to Mrs. Orgo's question, right, there's a retired policy that says like no parent shall be denied review or access to the education records for their minor children unless otherwise ordered by a court, blah, blah, blah. And so I think what I see implicit in this policy is that parents have access to their minor children's records, be they academic, scholastic, or anything else.
Well,
and so therefore that's why they have that authority to then allow a third party.
And that's, it's also in the Code of Virginia that, it's in the Code of Virginia that a parent and the student themselves have access to all school records.
Thank you very much for that. We'll go around the horn one last time. Ms. Aller, would you call that roll, please?
Yes, sir. Mrs. Ortega.
Aye.
Mrs. Young.
Aye.
Dr. Beers.
Aye.
Mrs. Donner.
Aye.
Ms. Hummel.
Aye.
Mrs. Hunley.
Aye.
And Mr. Dow.
Aye. Before we move on to 912, I want to thank Mr. Keever, Dr. Keever, for being a resource to us as we navigate these conversations. I appreciate that very much. We didn't prep Dr. Keever with many of these questions, in fact, just one, and you were on the spot for us, so thank you. 912, is there a motion to approve a recommendation for expulsion in student case number 2324-004?
Mr. Chair, I move that the school board accept the superintendent's recommendation for expulsion in student case number 2324-004 and authorize the superintendent or designee to establish conditions to be met during the duration of the expulsion.
Thank you, Ms. Donner. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Young. Ms. Aller?
Mrs. Donner.
Aye.
Ms. Hummel.
Aye.
Mrs. Hunley.
Aye.
Mrs. Ortega.
Aye.
Mrs. Young.
Aye.
Dr. Beers.
Aye.
Mr. Dow.
Aye. Move on to item 10.1. We have a few information items, gifted education, talent development program update. Dr. Herron.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This evening, Dr. Colorado is going to give us a brief update on the pilot program at James River Elementary School. Welcome, Dr. Colorado.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board, and Dr. Herron. I'm the coordinator for gifted education and talent development here in WJCC Public Schools, and I'm here tonight to update you, as Dr. Herron said, on the status of our pilot of the full-scale talent development push-in program at James River Elementary School. I'm not sure where to point this. Oh, thank you. At the last school board meeting, I mentioned our focused three-pronged approach to implementing gifted education and talent development with fidelity across our 16 schools. Robust screening and identification processes, targeted professional learning, and enhanced family communication. I also stated that we explicitly connected the goals of our local plan for the education of the gifted to the 6 goals of our WJCC strategic plan. Our local plan and all of our work is done through the lens of talent development. Tonight, I'm so happy to share with you what we have been doing to foster talent development in all of our students, with a particular highlight on the pilot program we have been implementing at James River Elementary School, none of which would not have been possible with the whole-scale commitment of the WJCC leadership team and the administrative staff at James River, our gifted staff, which one is here, Stacy Johnson, and all the K-2 teachers at James River. Before we talk about James River, exactly what is talent development? We define it as the intentional recognition and fostering of students' strengths and talents. Giftedness does not happen in a vacuum. If students, especially students who are often underrepresented in gifted programs, are not given opportunities to think and do at high levels, then we hamper their chances for academic potential to be seen. Thus, our department is supporting all K-12 teachers in all content areas to notice and nurture the academic strengths shown by their students. And we are implementing a K-2 talent development push-in program to talent scout for students early in their school careers. In our local plan, Goal 1, identification, we designed one of our strategies to be to implement a talent development program for K-2 in order to expose all students to selected critical and creative thinking skills in an effort to better prepare them for advanced academics and programming. The idea is that by elevating the thinking of all students, we will better uncover student potential for rigorous coursework and programs such as the Gifted program. Though the talent development push-in program is being implemented in all 9 elementary schools, 8 of our schools have an itinerant primary gifted teacher to serve them. This means that the itinerant gifted teacher is only at their assigned schools once a week. Thus, the program components are spread out over the course of each month. At James River Elementary School, however, we benefited from the repurposing of one of the former IB positions and secured a full-time primary gifted teacher there in the 21-22 school year. So we have 2 full-time gifted teachers at James River. Thus, we decided to run a pilot of the talent development program the way we envisioned it being implemented on a weekly basis. At James River, our teacher has been able to make an immediate and important impact on all the K-2 students and teachers beyond the talent development push-in lessons in the following ways. Through the quarterly talent development lessons with weekly follow-up in each K-2 classroom, weekly K-2 team planning in reading and in math, weekly K-2 classroom visits in reading and in math, weekly creations of extension work for reading, math, science, and/or social studies for any students who need it, and weekly monitoring of K-2 students with gifted potential or potential for advanced work. Our upper elementary teacher has also been able to do some of those same elements with grade 4 based on her schedule last year as well. One measure of the success of the full-scale implementation of our talent development program in K-2 can be seen in the James River gifted identification data. This data shows our spring gifted numbers, K-5, for our 3 underrepresented demographic groups for the past 3 years at James River Elementary School. We saw strong growth in our gifted identification numbers for these underrepresented subgroup populations this spring, as well as the total number of identified gifted students for the school. Though we still have work to do to help our gifted numbers match the school's demographics more closely, this data shows us that deliberate talent development implementation with students does work and can help us find more gifted students. I think we can agree that our data is compelling, but it is not the only evidence of the impact we have had from our talent development program at James River. Others around the state and beyond have noticed what we're doing there, and they want to learn more about us. We have hosted a talent development site visit at James River Elementary School for one local school division, with another upcoming in December. We have been invited to speak to numerous professionals at the Virginia Consortium for Gifted Education Administrators, the William & Mary National Curriculum Network Conference, and the Virginia Association for the Gifted State Conference. Most recently, we presented to over 100 gifted coordinators at the National Association for Gifted Children, the Gifted Children's Annual Convention in Orlando. We also have several of our own teachers interested in earning their gifted endorsement. Thus, we are exploring the possibility of organizing a gifted cohort through William and Mary. We would be remiss, though, if we didn't hear about the impact of our talent development program from James River staff themselves.
I love coming in here and helping us be big thinkers. Today, our thinking is going to actually be asking questions.
Talent development is the intentional searching for and fostering talent and strengths in our students. Every student has a talent. In education, our job is to help students find those strengths. A thinking routine is a structure. It's usually a set of questions that students can apply to any content area and honestly at any grade level.
Have you ever seen birds fly like this before?
Yes.
Did you ever wonder where they go?
They went in the house.
All of these children have an opportunity to explore their potential.
And I also see the sunset. Oh.
Their door is wide open and they have an opportunity to walk through it and discover what they don't even know about themselves yet.
We have a dedicated person who's pushing into our planning, who's providing professional development for us. Because of that, we have a common language in our building, 3 grade levels that have common language and thinking routines. Ms. Johnson is helping us raise the bar across the board. More of our students are becoming more apparent to us as students who have big thoughts. I see students who are articulating their ideas, students who are having a back and forth conversation where they're responding to someone else's idea. I see students that are more confident in expressing their ideas by themselves.
We need to find talent in our students. We need to nurture their strengths. And that is how we help all students have access to the most rigorous coursework available to them in their talent areas so that they can reach their own goals in life. We do firmly believe that by introducing talent development, all of our students will have improved educational outcomes. So, what are our next steps? This year, we plan to work just as hard as ever, serving our WJCC gifted students as well as all students through talent development. We plan to work hard to replicate to the best of our ability our successes at WJCC in our other schools and request additional necessary primary gifted positions in the upcoming budget process in order to continue growing our program. We will continue our family outreach efforts, offer on-demand professional learning for teachers based on interest and readiness, continue to purchase and create rich differentiated resources for all of our K-12 students, and focus on strong collaboration with our K-12 teachers. Mr. Chair and school board members, I hope our passion for our work is shining through to you. With talent development as well as everything we do for all of our students and our gifted students as well. I welcome any questions you may have.
Thank you for that and the presentation. And Ms. Johnson, thank you for being here. Enjoyed watching you on the video. It's like, that's her. Any questions or comments for our presenters this evening? Ms. Hummel?
I just want to say it would be so much fun to be in your class. Looks like everyone's having such a good time.
Miss Washington extended her invitation if any of you would like to come out and visit.
Ms. Ortega.
So I think you just said this at the end, but did you say that the goal is to have what you're doing at James River in all 9 elementary schools?
We're going to, yeah, that would be my dream, yes, that we had the same thing in all 9 schools. But there are definitely pieces and parts that we're able to implement, and we're doing that as well as we can in all of the schools. So yes.
But right now it's just once a week. You said it.
It's once a month.
Once a month.
Because the itinerant status of our other 2 primary teachers, they each have 4 schools. So.
If I could jump in and just respond to that as well. One of the things we talked about in June last year, the board was very interested in increasing the diversity in our gifted program and changing the numbers and giving more students to more opportunities across our division. This pilot is intended to show and has demonstrated that it's actually possible if we put resources into this particular program. And I think the numbers will start to speak for themselves. This early on prepares students to then to go into higher level classes later. And we purposely piloted it in a school that has 70% economically disadvantaged students and a very diverse student population. And it is working, and it's successful, and students are being successful. So part of Dr. Colorado's excitement today really in bringing this, and part of the reason for having you listen to the presentation today, is because it's going to become something we talk about in the budget time. And the board will make a decision at that point on where to put the resources that we have in the next school year.
As well, it should be, and I see your hand, Ms. Donner. Excuse me, Hunley. I'll speak over you though, but I really have appreciated the strategy in place. This is really apparent. Addressing K through 2 at James River first. I think what I heard though was potentially expanding it beyond elementary K through 12. Did you say K through 12?
We are doing talent development, having that philosophy with all K through 12. It shows up in different ways through classroom differentiation and challenge with resources we've purchased or created to push into classrooms for any K through 12 student who needs that. And we could also really consider our honors classes in middle school and high school, or advanced classes, that talent development area where we can see more talent bubble up.
You touched on what my real question was there. Really, what does the playbook look like, and how does that look differently from, of course it would look differently from K through 2, but, and is it being built? Is it something that's being built in-house? What's the
For the challenging work for students beyond grade 2, a lot of it is in-house, but we have also purchased resources, and then the teacher training component on instructional strategies is a big part of that. So teachers know how to address students and prepare their lessons to challenge those students. As far as talent development with the critical thinking skills and creative thinking skills, we are in talks within our elementary department of what can we do next year for third grade, because we're going to have a whole group of second graders across the division who have had talent development training for 3 years. Our local plan is only addressing K through 2. It's a 5-year plan. And, you know, we could add on to that, but I think we're organically already looking at what we want to do in third grade for next year.
That's wonderful. I'm sorry, Ms. Hunley.
Yes, I loved the video, of course. Are you finding children with the talent in art or music, and how is that being addressed? Because that, I mean, I remember having some amazing kindergarten artists.
Yeah, so that's another area of our local plan that we're exploring in this 5-year cycle, because stakeholders asked for us to think about the fine arts and if that was an area that we might feasibly be able to serve in under the umbrella of gifted. So we're in the midst of that research right now, and I actually have a meeting tomorrow about that with our fine arts director. So we're still exploring right now.
Thank you.
Well, thank you again for especially being with us so late and being so engaging and giving us something really positive to look forward to in the future, something we can definitely get around and support. Thank you so much. Appreciate your work. Final information discussion item, fiscal year 25 through 34 capital improvement plan discussion. I don't think Dr. Heron has anything further to add to her CIP, recommended CIP that she presented 2 weeks ago. I just wanted to open it up to the board for discussion. Wondering, does it serve the needs of the future as we would like to see, and is there anything that has not been considered? I think that in our conversations with Dr. Heron, conversations that senior staff have been privy to. It is right in line with our objectives and goals and shared objectives and goals with our community funding partners at the city and county. And so I look forward to joining you, in fact, this Friday at our joint meeting where we'll get to provide this CIP to our funding partners and have an opportunity to remind them that, you know, we came to some tough decisions and some conclusions around how to best serve the students of our community, and this is what it's going to take to do that. So we're going to have a good conversation on Friday. All right, we're going to round out our evening with board member comments. If I may start with you, Ms. Donner.
Sure,
okay?
thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Donner.
I just want to say to the transgender students who are in WJCC that sometimes institutions aren't always, sometimes lag behind where other parts of the country or the world are. And as someone who works out in the corporate sector, works with transgender associates every day and has my pronouns on my work Zoom, you're seen, and sometimes you just have to get through being in school. But once you get out into the world, like, the world is changing, and there is space for you and there to show up just as you are. And so keep pushing and advocating to the extent that you're comfortable. Keep talking to your allies and having them push on those things, and just know that it takes a while sometimes for institutions to catch up, but eventually they do. And so just keep pushing. So that's all I have to say.
Ms. Huntley?
I have a lot to say. One thing, we were at a conference last week and met with some Virginia Beach school board members whose meetings go to 2 in the morning. And I was like, right? 2. So anyway, I'm not going to keep you to 2. But I wanted to say that this is my 3rd year. This was my first time 2 years ago when I sat here at the table for the first time. And I love children. I ran on Always for Children, and that's what I stand for. And parents have rights, but parents aren't always right. And I can say that because I am a parent, and I've made some mistakes. I was that parent that didn't let my son check out certain books in elementary school, and then hindsight years later found out that he'd never docked a library again because of that. And that's not a proud moment for me as a parent. Or my daughter, who I didn't let watch certain things, is still binge watching things I didn't let her watch, and she's 22. But parents have always had rights. Also, I want to thank the people I talked to. So in the last month, I've been trying to understand everything related to transgender because, and again, I'm a transparent board member. For those of you, who have always asked the public for someone transparent, I'm being very transparent with you now. I did not know a transgender person or child. I didn't know what non-binary meant. And I talked to various people. I had one parent, I didn't time how long I talked with her on the phone. It must have been over an hour. And I didn't even know what cisgender meant. I was uneducated about these things. And she sent me resources. And I did take time to talk to a physician, 2 high school counselors, 2 middle school counselors, 1 elementary counselor, 10 children. Let me clarify this because last time I got in trouble. These were children that I had permission to talk to their parents. They were high school or either over the age of 18. And that was the thing that was, the children say that this is a compliment to WJCC schools. They say their schools are welcoming. They know to treat their friends with respect. They have, some of them say we mind our business. There were some stories that broke my heart. I wore my heart today. My heart was heavy. Sometimes, it's light, but I wear my heart on my sleeve. But to hear some of them talk about what their friends go through, their transgender friends, that was heavy for me. And so I want our children to be protected and safe. And so when I voted no on a policy, And I hear words like, and I thank the policy committee. I've never served on policy, so I know they put a lot of work into things. And when I hear words like attempting, conflicting, fluid, it doesn't sit well with me. And I wonder if some of these policies would have come to us if people had accessed all the people that I did to find a little bit more about these things. So I just want to thank everyone that took time to talk to me and didn't judge me. And I also want to say transparently again on names, I'm not going to get off the name thing. My name is Kimberly. I was named Cindy Lou at birth, but I was 4 pounds and I was 22 inches long. And thank God, my aunts said to my mother, "You will not name her Cindy Lou. She looks like a rat." So my mother named me Kimberly off the Kimberly Clark tissues that were by her bedside. I don't like to be called Kimberly. I am only called Kimberly when I'm in trouble. So if someone does that, I do still get triggered, even as an adult, when you say Kimberly. I prefer Kim. But if you were to go home with me anywhere, I am Kimmy Koo. Everybody in my family calls me Kimmy Koo. So anyway, names are important. And lastly, yes to recess. Recess, kids need to get out and run, and not just elementary. It's so important in elementary. They didn't even want to come in. I'd be out there freezing, have on my earmuffs, blanket, like, let's go, and they want to stay out and run. They need it. They need it in middle school, and they need to get up and get outside to get some vitamin D in high school as well. And I thank my board for putting up with my heart. That's me. But I think we did good work here tonight, and I just want to make sure that we protect and serve all of our children. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Dr. Beers? Your mic's off. Your mic is off, Dr. Beers. Dr. Beers, your mic is off.
Yeah, just so you couldn't hear me, that's why I turned it off. I want to thank, again, and congratulate Mrs. Fuller, our coordinator of special education. I know that she's an incredibly hard worker, and also know that we probably have the best, one of the best, if not the best, special education programs in our schools, largely due to the incredible work that our special ed staff do. I would also, most of you don't know this, I spent my first 3 years as a professor in Michigan, so I know all about collective bargaining. I taught at a university, and our collective bargaining book was that thick. There are some very positive things that can be done with collective bargaining, and not the least of, or the most important thing is an ongoing dialogue between teachers and staff and school board. And I certainly support that. I also was really impressed by the number of people that came out today. I've received a very large number of emails that were concerned about the transgender issue that has been embedded in some of our policies. But I think the other thing that's important is it's very important to be heard, to speak up so that other people hear you. Those voices are important, they're strong, and they do have an impact, not just here, but elsewhere. Don't hesitate to do that. Keep up with that. I'm going to just leave with an anecdote. It's a personal one that happened with me. I was taking my granddaughter, 12 years old. I was taking her to school one day. We'd been talking about different kids, and I said, God, I don't know how do you keep track? how do you keep track of, there's the trans, and then there's pan, and gay, and straight. And she looked at me and she said, Granddad, it's very hard growing up as a teenager right now, but I'm able to keep them all straight. It's not that hard to do. So I leave you with that. And this is probably next to the last board meeting. So anyway, I'm done. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Beers. Ms. Young?
Yes, I do too want to thank the people who came out and spoke tonight. Being a member of the policy committee with Ms. Hummel, we do struggle. We do talk a lot, and we're fortunate to have Mr. Kiefer, who brings people, because he knows that we're going to ask a lot of questions, and he brings people and make sure that we understand the things that are important to the division, but also understand the law. And he probably, if we had to do that on our own, I don't know where I would be. Probably, we probably wouldn't do a very good job. But we work very hard, and I do want to say that I feel like the division is doing what's best for all kids. One of the things that I've always loved about the school board is the focus on our students. They're the reason we're here. They're the reason our teachers are here. They're the reason our counselors are here. The reason administration is here. Our bus drivers, our cafeteria workers, our custodians. We're here for kids, and we want all kids to succeed. And I do use the word all, because I think that's what we're about. We're here to make sure that kids are successful and that they have something to look forward to in their lives. And we're preparing them for that. That's our job. I do understand the tiredness and exhaustion that comes with being a teacher. I don't miss that part of the job. I do miss being in the classroom every day with kids. That was the best part. The happiness, sometimes the sibling rivalry in our classrooms, and being able to navigate that, and the fun that came with being a teacher, I miss tremendously. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Young. Ms. Hummel?
Thanks. So this is my penultimate meeting. So one left after this. I do want to give whoever's still listening tonight
And thank you for being here.
a taste of what when the policy committee meets. It's two representatives from the school board. We try to be a balanced committee. We try to take the lead from our administration and getting the legal advice that we need. And so we're asking all those questions. Dr. Kiever has the head of counseling department. When we're talking about anything related to counseling, there's a representative from the counseling department. When we're talking about the student records, we've got someone from administration and someone that deals with student records. We've got all of the people that do the day-to-day administration and know the in and outs counsel us when we are having our policy discussions. And you're still conflicted, and I guess I'm comfortable with being conflicted. Life is going to be about balancing different people's interests, different motivations from parents, or children's rights, parents' rights. So I'm all about trying to seek that balance. I really, really appreciate all the parents that came out tonight to speak about their experiences with their transgender students. Unlike Mrs. Hunley, I'm very familiar with all these terms. I work at a university, and we have our pronouns on our signature pages. We have, we're counseled on how to deal with students that are coming into us as college-age students that have gone through life and are transitioning as a college student. So I'm familiar with all the struggles that everyone's going through, and I have to say, along with Dr. Beer's experience with his granddaughter, the kids have it. They've already got it. They've already understand where they are the most understanding, adaptable group, and maybe the parents that are having some issues with transgender will be brought along in the future. But the kids are fine. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you, Ms. Hummel. Ms. Ortega.
Yeah, I just want to echo what some of my colleagues have said in that I know that all 7 of us take everything we do very seriously, but especially when it comes to policies like the ones we discussed tonight. I know they weigh heavy on my heart. They weigh heavy on everyone's heart. We're sitting here tonight at 9:27 on a stage in a nearly empty auditorium because we care about creating a school environment where children are safe, where children are welcome, where children can flourish and become who they were always meant to be, and receive, first and foremost, a very good high-level education that will prepare them to be adults in the world that we currently live in. And these are issues that as adults they're hard to grapple with. I'm sure it is difficult for children to grapple with and figure out, and it is hard to be a teenager these days. And or child, teenager, it's a lot of pressures and a lot of anxieties that I know that all of our kids deal with. And we, as leaders, serve many different types of people, many different stakeholders. We have to balance children's rights, parents' rights, teachers' rights, and laws at every level. And we truly want to do the most good for the most people and create a welcoming and safe environment. I think I know we didn't talk about it tonight. I think it's somewhat a positive how many policies we did not have to update because we already covered them, because we are already an inclusive school division. We already are very anti-targeting, discrimination, harassment. We have already taken care of that, and that's already who WJCC Schools is. And so I do think that's a positive environment, and we will, moving forward, continue to hold respect and dignity for every person as one of the most important things that we consider. And I do thank everyone that came out and spoke. There was an array of topics, but especially the families of transgender students who, I'm sure that's not an easy thing to talk about, especially in a public setting. I have a lot of respect and a lot of compassion for what the family as a whole has been through to get to this point, and respect how they've supported their children. And I think that it would be sad if those parents had not been afforded the ability to be there for their child because maybe if they hadn't known when they did. I think that it's, we assume that most parents are going to be not supportive, and I know that there are some that aren't, but perhaps more would be more supportive if they were afforded the opportunity and to know early on what was going on. So I think that we just have to keep a lot of different situations in mind, and as leaders we have to consider a wide swath of people, and I think that's what we attempted to do tonight. So.
Thank you, Mrs. Ortega. There's been a lot that's been said this evening on a number of topics. I do want to share the sentiment with each of you, our gratitude for being here. For those that did need to leave, and there are other responsibilities in life than at school board meetings. You came, you spoke, you were heard, and I
greatly appreciate that. And I hope that some of you will tune into what's been said this evening and these closing remarks as well. I think that they're just as important to the conversation because as I listen to my board colleagues, I'm hearing that they've received your words carefully and considerately. And so I just hope that that gets across to our family members in the community. Thank you for being here, being a part of this process. And I won't take up any more of your time though with this. Move on to item 12, upcoming events. We have a student advisory committee meeting, or they do. The student advisory committee is meeting on December 13th at 3 at the Lafayette High School Media Center. And then upcoming meetings, we've got a joint meeting this Friday, the 1st, December 1st at 8:30 in the morning at the Stryker Center. That's a location change, but we have mentioned it twice now at the Stryker Center. Followed by December 12th, closed session and work session, 4 and 4:30 respectively, at the Central Office Room 300. I think that does it for this evening. Thanks again. We'll see you on the 12th.